Welcome everyone to my stream here on lichess and Twitch. I'm International Master William Paschall, and we're going to be playing blitz and classical chess together here with commentary and chat and questions. If you guys have any interesting chess questions you want to throw out there during the course of the stream, feel free to ask away. We are trying to have a lighthearted but instructive stream, and the focus here is on learning and improving our chess games. So with that in mind, we go forward. It is Thursday, January 12th. Be careful, tomorrow is Friday the 13th. I just realized. So the goal is here to play games between 5 and 8 minutes. We have increment time control, which we use. Unrated games. If you'd like to challenge me, go ahead and challenge me to a game between 5 and 8 minutes base time with an increment between 3 and 5 seconds. The faster games, like 5 or 6 minutes, you can make the increment up to 5 seconds, and for the longer games of 7 or 8 minutes, which most people would like to play, we do request a 3-second increment. So we're up and running. We've got challenges from 3 players already. I thought we had 4. Plucro, Suvik, and Constant Change. Plucro opting for the 5-minute with a 4-second increment, and Suvik and Constant Change with 8-3, which is the longest time control that I play. Yesterday we had my Weird Wednesday stream, which is basically focusing on playing unusual openings that I don't normally play. And by the way, hello Plucro in the chat there. Feel free to jump in and join the chat in Twitch. We're doing this every weekday from Monday to Friday, 10 to 12:30. And on Sundays, I am doing a simul on lichess, which takes place at 6:30 p.m. Central European Time. Chessy64, who I have played before, has challenged me to 3-2, which is the standard FIDE like blitz time control, but it's a little bit fast for the purpose of the stream, so I can't even really commentate. Let's save that for like off-stream private games. Chessy64, if you could re-challenge me to something a little bit longer, like 5-3, that's the minimum time control. I'm playing and discussing here on the stream. That was a mouthful, so I'm catching my breath, but we're ready to get started. So we also have a YouTube channel, Video Chess Training on YouTube. Today I'm going to finish and publish a video I've created on a review of several of my simul games from last Sunday. So stay tuned for that to be up on my YouTube channel, Video Chess Training on YouTube. Okay, Plucro, it is 5 plus 4. And we can play anything we want to play because it's not my special Wednesday stream. So let's start with knight f3. I'm usually a little bit groggy when I first log on. Haven't finished my coffee yet this morning. The wide open games with e4 can wait till later. We'll play a nice calm sort of flank opening here. Yesterday against Plucro, I had something interesting, if I recall. What was that opening? Oh, okay. e4, knight c6, bishop b5, a6. I was watching the replay of the stream yesterday, and that was one of the more entertaining openings, I thought, Plucro. So, okay, here, I mean, the standard thing to do would be to play knight c3 or knight c3 or d4. But I have been experimenting with both the Fianchetto King's Indian again. That's something I used to play a lot in the past, and also double Fianchetto type stuff, which is pretty popular. I mean, I've seen a lot of recent games with the double Fianchetto, but if I try to do it now, yeah, I guess it's okay now. I can do like b3, knight e4, d4. But I'm not sure that move order is the best for white. It's probably better to do like b3 without c4, and then later you can play c4. If I play b3 here, knight e4, d4, and then c5, it's not really the most accurate move order for white, I think. I should get b3 in before black's played bishop g7. So it would be better to do like maybe b3 right away, or omit c4, you know, and do like g3, knight f3, b3. In any case, it's either an English or a fianchetto King's Indian, depending if I play d4 or not in the upcoming moves. For a while here in the summer last year, I can't believe I've been streaming since February last year, almost a year now. I was playing like almost exclusively c4 and knight f3. But lately I've been branching out and playing more e4. So he played d5. Which is Grunfeld. Kind of an unusual moment to play it, isn't it? One could consider playing c takes d, knight takes d5, e4. In that position, maybe it would transpose to a normal Grunfeld after something like e4, knight b4, d4. But it's not really part of my everyday repertoire. We'll go with d4. This is a fast game. I mean, I'm used to playing these 7 and 8 minute games, so this is half as much time. Practically half as much time. I know that 5 is technically more than half of 8, but it feels like about half. So you have to be quite a bit faster. It's blitz. Maybe one day I should do, like a blitz stream where I play just like fast blitz, but I don't know, I mean, I've seen a lot of streamers do those kind of things with even bullet chess, but it's like the amount of instructiveness you gain from that is really kind of limited. Okay, so d takes c4. I haven't looked at this in years. I haven't seriously studied this in like 15 years. And even then, it was not that deeply. There was a time when I was playing, there were several times when I was playing g3 against the King's Indian, but lately, or Grunfeld, as the case may be. Lately, not a lot of work I put into it. Now, this usually is not very ambitious for black. Actually, the whole plan of c6 and knight bd7. c6 and knight bd7 is pretty passive for black, actually. So it's hardly a dangerous line. I mean, beginning with c6, black should play more dynamically. c5, or also interesting is knight c6 probably. That would transpose to a different variation. I don't know if you can play bishop e6 here. I don't think so. Might even be playable. Bishop e6, knight g5, bishop d5, e4, h6. But I think that c5 and knight c6 look like the correct moves. I'm gonna lose on time. Rook b8. Blue Crow is putting the rook on a very strange square. Tempting to go bishop f4, but I've already played b3, so that's pretty strange. Bishop on f4 would be prone to attack. I mean, I could drive him away from b8, but now I'm weaken myself with b3 in the c3 square. Lord Auric said, great stream yesterday. Good luck today. Just got out of bed. 4 a.m. in Montreal. Okay. Lord Auric, I did not know you were in Montreal. Maybe I knew that at some point, but I've forgotten. Rook e8. That's a logical move, though. I like that better than rook b8. What to do here? Queen c2. The problem is he's going to play knight b6 at some point, trying to trade pieces, perhaps. If I can overrun the center with e4, that would be good. Also, Well, one thing about rook e8 is his f7 pawn looks kind of weak. If a knight goes to e5, he has to watch out for f7 double threats. I don't like this position for black at all. Looks strange. Looks very strange. This lineup of queen c7, rook b8, too passive for black. The questionable position of the queen on c7, rook on b8. And now, maybe this was a mistake to play knight e5. I just reacted too quickly there. I could have gone back to c3, I suppose. In this case, I don't want to exchange pieces because black is very cramped. He should have probably taken on e5. For better or for worse, this exchange of pieces would free black's position. I think now he realized there may be some tactical problem. There was bishop e5. A little complicated. He does have that active deployment. However, same theme is popping up again. I almost moved my knight, but we have this very primitive move. Black should be lost. Alright, he just resigned. This time control is very fast. For this stream, for the games I'm used to playing. Constant change. Anyway, Blue-Crow takeaway from that is, in such a position where you give up the center with like d takes c, you have to react actively. This kind of passive play with c6 and knight bd7. And if you do that, you have to trade some pieces quickly. I don't know. When I play knight c4, knight e5, let's see. Knight b6. The knight just isn't well placed there. Yeah, it's not good to do c6 and knight bd7. I mean, you can try to play from that position, but generally speaking, it's just not good. Okay, constant change here is a regular feature of the stream. He's been playing a lot in the last couple of months. But theoretically, he's not really dangerous. He's just very fast, very practical, and a solid player overall. But I feel like my best chance against him is really in the opening. You know, to get an advantage out of the opening and keep it. That game was terrible. Yeah, you should stick with. I didn't let you play the Nimzovich defense. Constant change now playing bishop e3. This is quite a little theoretical move. I don't recall if he's played this before, but I did have another opponent, Mickey55, the other day, play this against me off stream. We had an interesting game there, and I have played this variation on occasion with white. In this position, once I beat Yermolinsky with bishop g5, I think. Played both sides of this position quite a bit. More with black than with white, obviously, as I don't play e4 all that often when I have reached this position. And the other day I was preaching to the choir that probably e5 is the most solid move. Not a move that I like personally, but if black wants to play a move that gives him the most solid game, I think that e5 doesn't really allow white too much. Railbird80, welcome. DST, I'd like to start the stream with some quiet openings before I get embroiled in some kind of tactical craziness. So that first game, yeah, c4, knight f3. I like to get warmed up a little bit with a nice, relaxing English opening. Was a Grunfeld finally, but Plucro, if you decide to play lines in the Grunfeld where you're playing d takes c4, you've got to have something for that, giving up the center. I mean, that's typically in those Grunfeld type positions, the most solid line is to play like d5 c6, maintain like in the Slav structure the d5 point. Why is this glowing? Oh, he made a move, and he must have just made that move because my time has hardly run out. Maybe Constant Change is checking my recent games or something, because this is exactly the same position I had against Miki 5-5. We talked about it yesterday. The Karaklaj variation. It's named after the Serbian, I think he was Serbian, theoretician Karaklaj, who's deceased. I did have the chance to meet him in Belgrade a long time ago, and a number of very strong tactical players have favored this variation for white, but I don't really think it's dangerous if black knows precisely what they're doing here. I'm not an advocate of disassembling your pawn structure in this way. Once I won a game, well, the only strong player I've ever played is Brian Smith, probably. I have some draws. White can probably draw with perfect theoretical knowledge, but I don't think that white can get an advantage in this variation. So that's where it stands. Knights against bishops are a theme here. But this is interesting because Constant Change has never played anything of this sort against me. Pretty deep kind of plans. White has mixes of strategic and sort of tactical ideas. Sometimes tactical, sometimes strategic. The two knights are an interesting feature in these kind of positions. Black doesn't really have any pawn breaks, and so the knights tend to be okay sitting there on d4 and c3. Difficult to get rid of the knight on d4 in particular. To beat Uncle Yermo, Uncle Yermo has a very bad score against me. But I think it's just, random. Well, he's never beat me. It's very, very bad to never beat me. I don't know, we've played at least 5 or 6 times, but it's sometimes just a stylistic thing. One player does well against another player. This is a bad mistake by Constant Change, strategically speaking. That's not the idea. I was just talking about knights against bishops, and so normally white is trading bishop takes c6. It's the same idea in the Rasalimo. Now I played queen f3. So typically there's like a gambit idea, a pawn sacrifice idea with queen f6. And what we have to look at is the possibility of tactics in such a position. I can force a trade of queens. He's threatening e5. Some ideas like this. But objectively, what about something like queen e7? This is not a position where you should move quickly. Okay. Queen e7, e5, d5. Now his bishop's hanging. You would have to retreat back to somewhere like a4 or d3. I guess d3. Then g6. White's position looks very, very dubious to me. The other possibility is queen f6. Trying to force a trade of queens. Probably forcing a trade of queens. I don't think that white can avoid it, because wherever he moves the queen next... Yeah, he could avoid it with queen e2, which is... It's a really lousy square for the queen, actually. So I have a choice. It looks like queen e7 or queen f6. Queen e7 looks safe enough. I don't like white's game. But there are certain variations that are similar to this. He's just instant playing what I was talking about. I don't like white's game. I think white has a bad position here. The pawn on e5 is weak. I have the bishop pair, a very strong center. And he doesn't have any kind of compensation of any sort. So this is just a very bad exchange on c6. Too much information is a dangerous thing. And such a line as this, I don't think you should play unless you're very well prepared with white. It's irrational. And white has just to find really concrete justification for messing up their position. So this is not the kind of position you can find the moves over the board. You know, it's just awful for white. Queen f6. This was a good practical try by white, objectively. Rather than play bishop c5 with no plan, attacking a pawn for the sake of attacking a pawn, we're going to establish the bishop on a square where it has a quite permanent influence on the game. It's really strange, though. I mean, instantly he played this move. This is very, like, debatable. But I'm not going to play rook g8. I could, but I lose my right to castle, so... It's so ironic to trade queens in such a position where your pawn structure is smashed up and black has the bishop pair. I mean, it looks like you're like, in a situation where you have to, like, go va-banque, you know, and he's trading queens. But... the space afforded from f6 gives him some hope, maybe. I don't like white's chances here if black plays well, but I guess black could misplay it. f6 is ugly. Yeah, I wouldn't play that unless I had no other legal moves in that initial position. It's just another pawn weakness, you know. e6 becomes weak after that, and white might be able to gang up on that with like bishop c4 and whatnot. It's not a good idea to make too many pawn moves. This position is no exception. So white's position is dubious at best. The bishop on d7 is passive now, but I can play c5 or maybe e5 depending on the situation. Knight e2. It looks pretty logical. Should I castle or not? Castling queenside, I don't think so. Maybe it would be better to castle and play rook fb8 and a5. But I was just thinking about something. I mean, maybe I'm better off playing e5 around here, just taking the squares away from his knight. I guess we can wait and see. I just don't think my king is 100% safe in the center here. Trying to blockade. This makes sense. There was no really good place for my king. Maybe c7. But then again, that file could open up at any moment. So I didn't want to put my king on d7. The f6 pawn is cramping. It's unfortunate. Maybe instead of a5, I could have grabbed this pawn. No, my bishop will be hanging on d6. So pawn takes bishop. Pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes a2, rook d1, and then my bishop's hanging. I don't think it's worth breaking up my strong central duo here. Try to pursue this variation with bishop takes a2. But I'm not really happy with my king being all the way out of play over there on g8. I mean, it was in the center. There should have been a way to keep it in the center, but I didn't have the natural square e7 for my king because of the pawn on f6. Ultimately, you know, I like my king to get away. Take, take. Man. That's better than bishop b5 for me. I was a little bit worried about bishop b5. His knight doesn't have any squares. As I said earlier, the c-pawn. Okay, let's go for the c-pawn. Activate my dark squared bishop to be relevant in this position is pretty hard to do. Maybe e4, bishop e5. This is a passed pawn. It also opens up possibilities of bishop g3. Yes, this was the best try. I didn't want to make my pawns like ragged with e4, but this starts to pick up a lot of pawns. This whole position is starting to fall apart. But what about this after rook takes rook, bishop takes, knight takes d5, rook takes a6. The a pawn looks a little troublesome. I'm not sure. Chessie's challenged me to 5-4. Thanks for changing your challenge there. I think that white did a good job initially, you know, setting up a kind of blockade, and it almost held. Even at the end, the a pawn looks pretty scary to me. All right, I've played. What did I play? c4 the first game. Oh, the French defense. I've never really enjoyed playing against the French defense. It's usually a very closed position, quite difficult maneuvering struggle in many cases, very long game usually. And then he played c5, which is cool because everybody's been playing knight f6 against me, and it's nice to play something else. So it looks like modern players are favoring this move, knight f3, but the main line has always been pawn takes pawn. But constant change. First of all, he left book there with knight takes c6. It's just a bad move for white. In the last game, in the opening, if you do choose to play this very anti-positional variation with the double pawns on e3 and e4, you really have to know the theory pretty deeply. It's a strange variation and very tricky tactically. But as I said, there are positional ideas for white. But trading the bishop on c6 doesn't really fit. You want to have the two knights playing against two bishops, where white, plays for the fact that black doesn't really have pawn breaks in that kind of position, so the knights can get good outposts. Okay, anyway. Anyway, back to business here. So, yeah, I think this is black's best line in the French. I mean, queen takes d5 is popular with a lot of modern players because it reminds you of the Sicilian, I think. But objectively, taking back with the pawn seems like the most correct. And I don't think that the chess players should be afraid of isolated queen pawns. It's a very, very important structure, and it's totally valid. A lot of people have a very, very big fear of playing with this isolated pawn in the center, but it's an important position and not necessarily bad by any means. Now, knight f6. Knight f6 is a strange move here, though. That knight is usually waiting and going to e7 with the black bishop on d6 or b6, depending on what happens with the pawn exchange. This may be playable. I don't see any refutation of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it should be that bad. Okay. Anyway. Later on, I might be able to move the knight and have a pin with bishop g5 that can be difficult to get out of. I'm not certain this is the best move, but it looks like we could be transposing. Well, it will never be actually it'll never be a Sicilian, really. This knight on d2 is strange. I mean, essentially, it is a sort of cross between the Sicilian and the French. I don't know why I'm coughing, guys. I went for a walk in the cold yesterday, but not for too long. Bishop e7, d takes c. Maybe I can try to hold on to that pawn. Not really, though. This is a fairly fast game again, 5-4. Can't change. I don't know much about chess theory. Well, it's easy to learn. You're alive in the digital age. You're a lot younger than me, I'm sure, and you have access to information at your fingertips. Whereas when I was learning chess, it was a matter of scouring through encyclopedic books. So it's pretty easy to learn opening theory, as opposed to 20 years ago or 30 years ago when you had to spend hours poring over chess encyclopedias and books. Of course, you need guidance. I mean, I know. It's not that easy, and you need time. Anyway, well, my queen is going to come under threat along the e-file. I don't know if I have time for holding this pawn on c5. I think we'll leave it where we're at. And I don't want to help him develop with bishop takes d7. So let's get out of here. You might ask yourself what I've achieved by playing like queen e2 check. Because I'm asking myself. I mean, the problem was the bishop on b5 is hanging. So that has to be resolved one way or another. And if I take on d7, I'm helping his development. And if you don't play bishop b5 check, what do you play? You know, bishop d3 can always be hit by like c4. I don't want to take on c5, help him develop. It's kind of this POE, the process of elimination, right? You know, now I could be justified in taking on d7 because he's wasted a move on a6. And bishop d3, bishop g4. Might be okay if I can hold on to that pawn on c5. If he plays something aggressive like bishop g4, he gives me time to hold on to my pawn. Rook e8 is a good move. Wow, I'm going to lose on time. Queen e3, anybody? I will hold on to this pawn if I get a chance. He does not care? Really? Wow. Okay. I don't understand why you don't want that pawn back. Shall I play h3 first? I don't think so. He's got a very high bullet rating. And in fact, he challenged me to 3-2, so it seems like chess he likes playing for time. But the 4-second increment is quite generous. No, I think he's making negative progress. This routine move, rook c8, doesn't really serve much purpose here. He had bishop takes f3. Maybe d4, actually. d4. Knight takes d4. Knight takes d4. Bishop takes d4. Bishop takes f3. G takes f3. But it doesn't do anything but lose a couple pawns. I lose a pawn to weaken my king side. Yeah, it didn't really work. But I don't really like Black's game here. I don't understand what he's doing. You know, after all this, is he gonna like try to get his pawn back? Knight c4. He could have had the pawn back like 8 years ago. If that had been your goal. Knight a5. Subjectively, Black is lost here. Four on three majority on the queen side. Bishop pair, weak pawn on d5. Doesn't look good. He can't take the pawn back. Okay, I win a lot of games because people overestimate the value of my time pressure. This looks like one of those. I mean, you see me with like 7 seconds and you think, oh, I'm going to win. But it's not, you know, it's not a sudden death game, and I'm used to doing this. It's like a routine, so you just cannot play for time in increment games. Maybe if the increment is 1 or 2 seconds, we can definitely say that's a viable strategy, but if the increment is greater than 2 seconds, I think it's just a fatal mistake. I didn't want to allow him to play knight g4. That's why I went to f3 rather than like queen d2. Looks like I'm panicking a bit here. 4-on-2 majority. Where is International Master Spinal Tap when we need him? Wow. That was fortunate. Maybe I was winning somehow, but I wasn't sure. Not certain I was winning there. Okay, tough game. I am not pleased. I do ask that everybody has an established rating. Too much chess hustler in him to get flagged in a +4 increment game. Yeah, it's pretty luxurious, the 4-second. I struggle with 2-second increments sometimes if I'm not warmed up. I am not pleased. I think I screwed that up, though, pretty well. I invoke the name of Spinal Tap, our friend Tom Bartel, who's here a lot on lichess. He seems to have very good technique. The other day he beat me in a bishop versus knight ending. That was a draw. I had a forced draw and a repetition on the board, and I didn't see it in time pressure. Bishop in 2 pawns against knight in 1. Alright. Sometimes I play knight c3 and sometimes I play knight f3. It just depends on my mood. Queen's Gambit. This is very popular, although not lately here on, well, at least not on lichess. I mean, Bishop b4, the Rogozin variation, is a line that was really, really popular for like the last 10 years. In a large part due to, like, especially Mamedyarov, I think, playing a lot of games with it, but many players at the top. Aronian. It was a pretty trendy line. Now, I don't know, not as much. I'm not pleased as taking my advice. I haven't had one of these in a long time. I used to face this constantly. Maybe not so much here on the stream, but just in general, playing blitz online. So guys, don't forget to check out my YouTube channel. I'm going to post this evening or this afternoon. I'm going to post a review of 3 of the games from my last simul on Sundays. Every simul I do on Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Central European Time. I'm not pleased said again the same mistake like yesterday. What mistake is that, sir? I don't see any mistakes here. Maybe somebody might argue that Queen a4 check is a mistake. This is a very common theoretical line. I got this idea to play Queen a4 check from International Master Tibor Károly, who's a Hungarian opening theoretician and trainer. But it's been pretty well analyzed. Lots and lots of games. I don't think that objectively... I doubt that objectively Queen a4 check is White's best move. But there are a lot of really complicated variations after Bishop b4, Bishop g5, or even C takes d5, E takes d5, Bishop g5. Those lines are probably critical. And we could even play e3 and transpose to the Nimzo Indian. But I don't think you've made any mistakes. I'm not pleased. What is this position called? It is the Rogozin variation of the Queen's Gambit declined, and has undergone a renaissance in the last 15 years. It went from being like a almost never seen opening to a very, very popular defense at the highest levels. Queen a4 check wastes a bit of time to force his knight to come to c6. But strong players who are expert in this system for black know how to they know how to make do with a knight on c6. It's an inconvenience, but it doesn't mean that black doesn't have ways to play around the awkward knight on c6. Almost every position has some kind of, when you're black at least, there's almost always some kind of serious problem with your position. Now knight a5, that's extreme. That's a very extreme attempt to correct the bad knight. I don't think I've faced this maybe once in a random blitz game. So well, I can't just lose a pawn, obviously. I'm surprised that I haven't seen this more often. It's a kind of obvious try. Knight a5. I'm fairly certain I have to take on d5 here. So what are the drawbacks of the move knight a5? Leave your knight on the side of the board. And then he instantly took with the knight on d5, which I did not expect. I expect a more stable e takes d5. Expected. We have to be prepared for knight b4 when that bishop goes away or something. The eventuality of knight to b4, well, I could just play e4, it just occurred to me. Very straightforward move here, possibly best. Not my original plan, but it's a strong knight on d5, so why not? If bishop a4 wasn't a check, that would be a tactical resource for black here. I mean, if the capture wasn't with check, black would have some interesting possibilities of like knight takes c3, b takes c3, bishop a4. Even then, I could move my queen to b2 or d2. So I'm not pleased trying to figure out a solution to the bad knight on c6, but I think he went like, a little overboard. Knight a5 is too extreme. It's too early to be moving the knight a second time, and you need to get your position more in order first. I am not pleased tried to take the bull by the horns, but he fell under the bull, and he's getting dragged around the rodeo. After e4, it looks better for white. There are different colors of arrow. Thank you, Constant Change. I will check that out. If you hold Shift or Auto Control without... Aha. You found it yesterday. I will keep that in mind. It's a good idea, particularly for coaching purposes or making videos. Here on the fly, I don't think I'm going to be needing different colors of arrows too much, but it is interesting to know. So white has the center and a very good game. But all hope is not lost for black. I'm trying to come up with more of a plan than let's move my bishop and castle. A deeper plan is in order here. Perhaps you could try to grab the bishop pair with like knight e5, but objectively that's not necessarily that great. How do I react to c5? What would Ivan Sokolov do with white? Try to inspire myself by saying things like that. If I see a position that's looking like someone I know would enjoy playing, I often say, what would so-and-so do? In this position, it's the kind of position an aggressive queen pawn player would enjoy, I would think, with white, but still not so easy. I was thinking about bishop f4 with the idea of just launching this pawn down the board. It probably isn't a bad idea. But we do need to get the king side developed. This is a surprisingly tricky situation. I mean, c4 is even possible, but it feels like overreaching a little bit. Maybe not. There's a check on b4, of course. All right. I honestly was really on the fence here. At first I wanted to play bishop d3, but then I decided that c5 gave black some counterplay. Then I wanted to play bishop f4, but I decided my kingside development was lagging too much. So then I finally decided to play c4 when my spatial advantage is so big. Maybe my development lag doesn't matter, and I can meet c5 with d5, which looks pretty good for white. I mean, this variation, I mean, you know, if he does something like bishop e4 check, bishop d2, this knight is still embarrassed on a5. There's a lot to think about in chess. John Fedorovich said, think a lot. Think about all you got. And I think that's from some cheesy song from like the 70s or something. But now we can just take care of business, you know. Now that we've played c4, we're prepared to meet c5. On the other hand, there's also the question of the knight bouncing back through c6. And putting my bishop on on d3 or e2 becomes an issue. And I still need to develop my king side. Rather than get forked by some kind of knight b4 type of thing, I'm just going to play bishop e2 rather than bishop d3, so that I don't have to, I can ignore knight c6 basically if he plays that. But this is quite a bit more passive than putting the bishop on d3. Still, white center seems like a permanent advantage here. Unfortunately, I think this game is going to be just decided by time because both of us are taking a long time. c4 I would not have played. c4 is strange. It isn't, you know, it's a thinking outside the box kind of move. Now, I think one has to take toward the center here. The other thing is that the bishop protects my king. Quite a dynamic situation. But I think you got to favor the central majority over the wing pawns. Maybe I'm asking for it if I do that. Forgot about bishop b4. So we may have to blockade the pawn where it stands. No problem. No problem. I mean, we can't blockade it where it stands. We'll have to allow it to advance to c3, but it's still... it's within firing range. I could play queen c3 though. Nothing wrong with that. No, he's going to play b5 now. It's going to get kind of scary. Well, this is going to get sort of nasty. Well, not a lot of time here. This could get very extreme. b4 cannot be allowed. He's not only played well, he's played extremely quickly. Black may well be better here. The only danger at the moment is losing on time, but Black's position looks certainly solid. How fast he is. Bishop there. Really? Wow, that's impressive. G4. This guy's pretty strong. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea he was this strong. Bishop d3 was clearly better there. Wow. King of Fate, not the most convenient. Not the most convenient square to move the king to. But what an effort. 1700. Damn, dude. I mean, you played like a solid master until the end when your time melted down, but you were clearly better at some point. I mean, and that was a complex position with a lot of dynamics going on. So you really had a serious advantage there, I think, in the competing pawn majority situation. It looks scary for black, but you found calm moves and I think very well played. Lazar Kolic, well, as I predicted, it was kind of decided by time pressure, but not a game I'm really happy with. The jury is still out on my decision to play c4 in the opening. I don't know. Okay, so d4, knight f6. He almost blew me away on the queen side. Yesterday I tried this so-called Gingy Indian. It's funny that later on they would call the modern variation where you do like g6, bishop g7, c4, d4, e4, c4, d4, c5, d5, bishop takes c3. That they would Gingy and the other people who were working with him would call that the Gingy Indian, but this was already called the Gingy Indian. So you're kind of like giving the same name to a different opening. It's a strange concept, but this never really caught on. I mentioned yesterday Eric Schiller, I think, wrote a book on this, some little pamphlet or something in the 80s. But now knight c3, and so c5. Does this make sense here? c5? What am I doing if he takes on c5 in that position? Actually, that's a problem. c5, d takes c. No, actually I can play queen a5 or something. Oh, goodness. That doesn't seem right, does it? Something strange about this. A little more research is probably necessary. E6, E4 is very good for white. B5 is an unsound gambit, therefore we have to play C5. What happens after C5, D takes C5, E6, B4, A5? Is that the point? I can just do that anyway. Strange concept, but maybe that's the point. Like C5, D takes C5, E6 anyway, and I'm not convinced by this, though. We're going to need a little more research on this opening before I play it again. I played it in the last game for yesterday's Weird Wednesday stream, but I'm just playing it without any real theoretical knowledge. What other choice is there, though? I mean, anything else would just be bad for black. Third move, huge, time, lose. But time isn't important, dude. That's the whole point of my stream. One one of the founding fundamental. I mean, time is important. It's not how much time you have. You need to use your time to think, and if you don't use your time to think, then the time can go to the grave with you, How many people lose to me with like 5 minutes left on the clock? You're like, it's like an Egyptian burial philosophy for chess, Are you going to put the time in the coffin with your body when you finish the game, or what? There's no points for how much extra time you have at the end of the game. C5, I need to make a decision here, or I can make a bad move without thinking, which is what most people do. So I don't think it's much better to not make a bad move than to worry about spending 3 minutes on a single move. If I need to, I will. If I hadn't made such a big deal about it, I'm sure Lazar College probably would have done something else, but since I drew his attention to C5, he goes and plays it. Yeah, I don't know. It's very, very close to a Nimzo-Indian classical variation. Of course, the queen's not on C2. But knight A4, I think I feel some tricks coming on here. Years ago, Michael Valvo played this opening against me in the New York Open. He's a pretty solid IM. I don't know if he's still alive or not. He lived in Colorado. Very good theoretician. And I lost quickly with white in a game that disturbed me very deeply because of A6. So, knight E4, I would imagine here, is white's problem. I can win a pawn back with bishop takes C5, knight takes C5, queen A5 check, bishop D2, queen takes C5. But white has the bishop pair there, and the real question is this. The sensible developing move for white, calling into question his knight A4, queen A5 check, queen A5 check, well, I only had to think on the third move a lot because I played this opening for like the second time in my life. And I just realized, that C5 is kind of risky because of D takes C. So I had to figure out the entire mysteries of that move for the first time. Anyway. Queen A5 check. Is that a constructive move for me? Once I get to a position I actually understand, there will be less questions asked. Oh, this is still kind of annoying. Bishop takes C5, knight takes C5, queen A5 check. Still not satisfied with my position. He must be the world's leading expert on this. He played knight F3 very quickly. The problem is, queen A5 check right away. Is it even sensible to bring my queen out? Bishop D2. Not especially good for white. All right, I guess I just have to do knight takes C5. After all that thought, I came to a conclusion. I mean, bringing my queen out to a5, I don't think that's good. Now, there are some questions about this position. We may need to answer. We are playing an experimental opening, and it's not Wednesday, which is the day I normally play unusual openings. I can't even remember my own game from like 1993 or whenever it was. 1994. I played Michael Valvo. It's a long time ago. I don't even remember if I played knight c3 or knight f3, honestly. I think I probably like chickened out and played knight f3 on move 3. With knight c3, c5, d takes c5, that's a very annoying move. Wouldn't it have been better to play queen a5 or something, take the pawn with the queen? That looks really bad. I think black's position is kind of dubious here. Dubious. Maybe we have some really dynamic try. I want to play aggressively if I can, but I'm behind in development. Wow. Yeah, this isn't really dangerous at all. I'm so happy he didn't play knight back to c3. That was clearly white's best move. Queen a5 check. Knight c3, knight e4. Is one attempt. Queen a5 check, knight c3, knight e4. Let's just simplify. His queen is misplaced on a4 here. Although he is going to gain a tempo back, it looks like, at some point. This is equal. It's just a kind of hedgehog. It shouldn't be dangerous for black in any way. Delaying castling intentionally in this position. Would be very routine to castle, but he gains a tempo with queen c2. And if he plays it now, it's kind of tricky because the h7 pawn is poisoned. And we can probably exploit his queen on the c-file. So this is a pretty important move order for black to play b6 in this position rather than just automatically castling. And anyway, I need to get my bishop to a good diagonal. With bishop b7. Yeah, e3 gave away his advantage. If he plays knight back to c3, I think black has serious questions to answer in this position. It fits the principle of like not trading pieces when you have a kind of tangible space advantage or lead in development, as white does there. Neil Skinner, welcome to the stream. Okay, b5 is a good idea, Plucro, in some positions. It's been hanging around in some variations. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but Obviously, it's a theme. Yeah, bishop e4 now. Rook a7 or bishop b7 or knight c6. So disappointing. I didn't want to really trade pieces, but what am I going to do? It's like a queen a4, bishop a6, queen's Indian. Stopping bishop b4. In my experience, the c4 pawn tends to be pretty awkward in said scenario. But we have other issues here, it looks like. Oh man, come on now. I guess we just have to play b5. Speaking of b5, what's going on? I may have had better. He's pretty fast. I just had a very disturbing message from my computer that was unsolicited. I love Windows. It just totally randomly stuck this message in the middle of my screen that I had low disk space without any provocation whatsoever. Like, I really need that message when I'm in the middle of doing something. Microsoft. Like, I thought my power was off or something. It's ridiculous. I thought I forgot to plug in the laptop or something. Alright, let's get some pawns on white squares. This is a draw. Wow. It's just a draw. There's nothing better for black here. You have to be careful about this. But that's probably okay for black. King d4. There's no way I'm winning this position. He's like a force field on the white squares. Okay, good game, Lazar Kolic. Gilgamesh from my country of residence. By the time we got a pretty good endgame there, I was in such desperate time pressure that I started to miss good moves. Gilgamesh has played tough. Let's try something different today. Caro-Kann defense. It's much more passive than the Sicilian, but I like it as something different. I think it's good to have, solid openings and more aggressive openings that you can switch between the two depending on the situation. Obviously, if you're like a tournament player, there are going to be some players who you're like content to hold an equal position against, others who you have to beat, depending on the situation. Bishop d3. The exchange variation of the Caro-Kann, as played by Robert Fischer in his early career. Later he would switch and play like the two knights variation, losing to Kiris a couple of games. Fischer had a hard time against the Caro-Kann for some reason. He never really found variation that was good for him. Now c3. So the trendy line is like to play queen c7 and e5, but I've never really liked that so much. Trades pawns and sometimes some pieces. I don't really see the big attraction to queen c7, honestly. I guess it's solid, but nice and very strange game. Never faced with this stuff before. Satisfied with the result. Yeah, I mean, well, I never played it before yesterday, and I faced it once. I was very disturbed, again, against Michael Valvo. I had no clue what I was doing and lost. He was a stronger player than me back in 1994, or whenever the heck it was I played with him. Now knight f3. This is not the main line. I mean, bishop f4 is the main line. There's another Hungarian IM, Sos Béla, I think, who plays this specialty variation here, h3. I had a game against him that was a draw. But knight f3 is not really considered to be a main line, I assume, because of bishop g4. Now, you could play queen b3, but knight a5. There's an argument for even trading on f3. It's a closed position. I don't have any problem with this exchange. Bishop takes f3, queen takes f3. The queen is misplaced, and black has no bad pieces. But it's kind of releasing the tension. That's the safest move for black in my book. I mean, nothing wrong with bishop takes f3. Now, bishop f4, this is very, very similar to an exchange Slav type position. Of course, this pawn would be on e3, not on c3. Black would normally play a6 in those kind of lines. I don't know, e6. I mean, there's nothing wrong with black's position. It's a little bit passive. I guess that's why people like, as I said earlier, people like playing this other line with like queen c7 and e5. Black doesn't get into a passive position, but Tom Bartel, or Spinal Tap, an international master from the US here, was also playing like g6. This is also possible, but I've never really liked fianchettoing my bishop into this pawn structure. Karpov was my influence in playing this variation, and he always liked to play this way with this traditional knight c6, knight f6, and if queen b3, queen c8. I don't think that white has an advantage here, but on the other hand, his position is really very solid and quite easy to play. Um, he never played 3F3. Blue Crow, what is 3F3? What are you mysteriously referencing there? Uh-oh, looks like we're losing the stream. That's very strange.